Okay, our next speaker truly needs very little introduction. I imagine that most of you already know her, and yet I ask her for her permission to introduce her myself. Gal Hakim, is the living spirit behind this day, and in many ways behind the entire movement that has been growing, evolving, and flowing in recent years within the field of human-animal relationships in all its richness and diversity. She's an activist and an entrepreneur in every sense of her being. Her deep love for all living creatures is evident in everything she does, and from this profound connection, along with her rare ability to inspire action and create meaningful change rooted in a deep belief in the power of relationships, she has led and continues to lead a truly significant transformation, perhaps one of the most significant shifts this field has seen. Gal will talk today on women leading change, intersubjectivity as the foundation for new ethics in human-animal therapeutic relationship. So it really is my pleasure and my honor to invite our next speaker, Gal Hakim.
Wow. Thank you, Sarit.
My
Wow.
pleasure.
So I take a deep breath and I'll start. For some reason, I'm still seeing Lauren slideshow. So I'll try again.
It's yours, Gal. We can see yours.
Okay, so I'm with Lauren, but okay. So, okay, good afternoon and good morning. כיף להיות כאן, כיף לראות אתכם. אני יודעת שזה לא קל באנגלית, אני מקווה שתהיו איתי. We'll try to be together. My name is Gal, so as Sarit said, I'm an educational psychologist, co-director of the Human and Animal Institute with my partner, Dr. Ariel Tzovel. And also, I'm the head of the Animal-Human Psychotherapy program at Oranim Academic College with my amazing partner Inbar Bar-El. And these days, we are opening a new clinical training program at Tel Aviv University for experienced therapists seeking advanced training in trauma and crisis work in the presence of animals. Today, I want to invite you into a journey that began where my personal and professional worlds met. So, after another round of war, the government announced that we are returning to normal. But how does that transition actually happen? Almost in an instant, from a state of survival, vigilance, and constant alertness into daily functioning, thinking, and writing. My experience was not one of returning, but of a sharp jump between states that do not sit together, between a body still responding to threat and an internal and external demand to carry on as usual. Within this tension between survival and the attempt to organize meaning, I found myself traveling south to Eilat, searching for manta rays. Unexpectedly, in the midst of everything happening in Israel, for the first time in history, a group of manta had arrived here. I found myself traveling south, searching, maybe for manta rays, and maybe simply searching. I'm not even sure what I was looking for. At first, I thought I was escaping, but in retrospect, I think it was something more precise, a movement toward an encounter that cannot be controlled. Meeting a manta ray has been a dream of mine for years, and alongside that, there was another expectation, almost the opposite, the expectation of disappointment. Thoughts like, I probably won't see them, it's rare, better not expect too much. At first glance, this seems like defense against disappointment, but it can also be understood differently as an attempt to reduce what cannot be reduced, a way of bringing the unknown into a familiar script. In this sense, drawing on Levinas, the manta became for me an image of what we might call the irreducible other, an other that cannot be reduced to my expectation and does not fully enter my understanding of control. Paradoxically, the expectation of disappointment revealed how much I was holding onto a doer position, seeking to fix the other into a familiar script. Later, I joined a group of people who, like me, had gone out to search. Very quickly, the desire to meet the other turned into pursuit, almost hunting. People started to write, save me one if you see it, I have to meet one. Some of the women in the group spoke about the impulse to conquer, how the pursuit was taking over the search, and their voices were quickly dismissed. That moment, which seemed like just an argument in a WhatsApp group, revealed something deeper, how easily an encounter with the other becomes a movement of control. And I found myself asking, what am I actually doing here? Because even if I didn't dive, I was just snorkeling. Even if I didn't chase, I still went out to search. I still entered a space where the other had to be there, as I needed them to be. And suddenly I felt embarrassed, because it was clear that the manta had no interest in meeting me. And maybe something begins there, not where I tried to meet the other, but where I began to ask whether there is a meeting at all. How quickly do we turn the other into something familiar? And how hard it is to bear not knowing. As Jessica Benjamin suggests, only by tolerating the tension, this tension, can two subjects coexist without collapsing into domination or submission. We can think of this as a movement between two positions, being the doer, defining, organizing, reducing, or opening to an encounter in which the other remains other. We've talked about not knowing, but I won't keep you there. I didn't meet many manta rays. I didn't meet them at all. But in my imagination, during long hours in the water, I met many. The real manta kept moving toward Egypt, toward Jordan, following the plankton. I wish we could move like that too, between countries, between borders, without separation. I have to say that a few days after I returned home, there were reports that they had come back to Israeli water. That movement in the water, fluid, responsive, felt so different from the rigidity I've been holding since the massacre of October 7th. And I have to go back to that point, October 7th. Sirens, abducted children, a country paralyzed in fear. There was an urgent call for psychologists to volunteer, and I kept asking myself why I wasn't going out to help. At the same time, animals, dogs, cats, cows, chickens were abandoned under fire. I went out on rescue missions with my partner and kept asking, what am I doing? While people suffer, I'm saving animals now? Requests came in for animal assistant therapists to join field operation. Therapists arrived with cages, with mobile petting zoos, once again recreating power-based relationship. As the war went on, I felt pulled in two directions. deep sorrow for the civilians and children in Gaza, and also empathic fatigue. And the question stayed, how do we speak about the pain of the other? Survival. Survival leaves no room for other voices, for the weak and the invisible. There are the good and the bad, the important and the less so. When I spoke against the war, my voice was pushed back, attacked. Can we hold complexity, hear multiple voices, build something that holds them together? And how do we practice therapy in a place where no one is really listening? Some are recognized as subject in need of care, and others are pushed into the position of object serving the care. Can we resist using the other to heal the human soul? When I tried to speak about this tension, I was told this is not the time to talk about animals. People are more important. This draws a clear boundaries of recognition. Who counts as an other and who cannot, and who can be reduced without it even becoming a question. If we think with Emmanuel Levinas, the other is the one whose face calls me to responsibility before any hierarchy. From this perspective, the question is not just whether animals are as important as humans, but what happens to us when the other becomes a means. And in condition of ongoing threat, the pressure to reduce the other, to make them manageable, usable, controllable, becomes especially strong. Is it possible even then to hold the possibility of the irreducible other? More broadly, the question we hold often unconsciously shape how we act in relationship. The shift from one-person to two-person psychology in relational psychoanalysis is not only theoretical, but a shift in stance from understanding the other through my world, my needs, my interpretation, to recognizing two subjective worlds, neither reducible to the other. In Benjamin's work, this shift appears in the question that guide the encounter. No longer, what does the patient need from me? How can I understand them correctly? But rather, what is happening in the other that I cannot fully see? How does my presence affect them in ways I may not notice? How can we hold a space in which both of us act and are affected without one absorbing the other? I adopt Benjamin's perspective and feel that developing the relational approach for animal-human sharpens questions that were not asked before. I'm happy that yesterday in the conference, they've started to be like the normal question. For example, the question that was almost always asked was, how does the encounter with the animal contribute to the patient's mental state? This question has been replaced by others. What price does the animal pay? What does the animal gain from this encounter? What implicit relational knowledge takes shape in the interaction between therapist and animal? In this sense, therapy is no longer a process in which one knows and the other is known. It is a space where the other cannot be reduced to my understanding. And precisely because of that, recognition becomes possible. But we all know how difficult it is to stay with this tension, not knowing the other. We meet it every day outside the clinic. In close relationship, I often find myself already knowing what the other will say before they speak. How much room do they really have to surprise me from that position? And maybe the question is not how to avoid this tendency, but how to recognize it and reupon the possibility of encountering the other as irreducible. From here, I want to suggest that this lecture is also a retrospective view of a decade of work within the relational approach, and at the same time, an attempt to look forward toward what I still cannot see. Because what has become clear to me over the years is that The challenge is not only to recognize the other, but recognizing the moments in which the other disappears, precisely when I'm certain that I see. I remember a time when being vegetarian was part of my identity, and still I convinced myself there was no problem eating free-range eggs. We had chicken in our yard, and I felt proud of the freedom they were given. There was one chicken who changed my life. I didn't give her a name, but I was certain I knew her and respected her. People would say, she has 5 stars, at least enjoy her eggs. I remember the moment she incubated her eggs. I moved her and I took them. For a second, I thought, this isn't fair. But I told myself, there's no chicken there. There's no chick there. And I took them. Something about her stayed outside what I could see. As I said, this lecture moved through these spaces between what we see and what we don't, between recognition and reduction, and between the possibility, always partial, always fragile, of encountering the other as irreducible. And it happens to all of us. Jessica Benjamin, writing, has accompanied me for many years. She taught me to think in complexity, to hold tension, not to rush to reduce the other. And still, she chose to support BDS in relation to work from Israel. When I learned this, I felt disappointment. How could she, of all people, move into a doer position? And at the same time, there are parts of me that identified with her. I can understand how this happens in moments of intense conflict. Holding complexity becomes very difficult. To see that we can both be vulnerable and harmful at the same time is almost unbearable. And the urge to reduce, to choose one side, to flatten, to decide becomes very strong. I don't bring this to answer a political question, but to ask another. What happens to relational thinking when it meets a reality of deep conflict? For a long time now, it has been difficult to sustain moments of encounter and hope. Expression of disconnection and aggression took over. I find comfort and the way forward in the relational approach for animal-human. But what does that actually mean? We talked a lot about relational approach, so just to try to make it a little bit clear. The relational approach for animal-human psychotherapy is based on recognizing animal rights, not only welfare. Moving from egocentric, ethnocentric stance toward the field of mutual influence. This idea did not grow only from work with animals, but from a broader social view, one that first focused on people outside centers of power. The key point is this. When society applies different moral standards to animals, it risks doing the same to vulnerable groups, people with disabilities, refugees, infants, and others. Reagan argues that animals, like many vulnerable humans, are subject of a life and therefore possesses inherent value that does not depend on cognitive capacity. Drawing on Hamilton and Taylor, animal rights are not just ethical guidelines, but a wider framework, one that imagines a shared multi-species society. That this shift changes how we think, feel, and relate to animals in therapy and, of course, beyond. The relational approach invites us to adopt a dual-purpose stance. On the one hand, I think it's obvious after Lorraine's lecture. On the one hand, supporting the animals' rehabilitation and asking what they gain from the encounter. On the other, recognizing the emotional value it holds for human. In the therapy room, I do not expect the patient to rehabilitate the animal. unless it meets an emotional need. I do not allow forced contact or visible harm, but that is the easy part for me. The real responsibility lies outside the therapy hour. We need to ask, why is this animal here? What is this animal biography? How did it come to be here? And at what cost? And this extends further, of course, to domestication and to the fact that we work with animals in captivity, no matter how large that space may be. In professional settings, I often hear the term hand-fed parrot. This is a hidden trauma, a cheek taken from its parents to bond with humans. As therapists, we are trained to notice invisible trauma. That's what we do. But with animals, we often don't. Sometimes we don't see it, and sometimes we don't allow ourselves to face it. I think about myself in these moments. I remember convincing my partner, a lifelong horseman, that our horse, Piccolini, was not suffering. He lived in an open space with his herd after being rescued from difficult conditions. It was important for me to believe that he was choosing the relationship with me. But looking back, I see that I could not see. The hackamore on his nose disturbed me, but what was harder to face was that his consent might not be a choice, but the result of training, a history of control. My partner used to say, if you really feel you are together, get on him with nothing, no beat, no rinse, just ask and see what he allows. I never dared. And when I saw him move with Piccolini until Piccolini had enough and threw him off, I realized how much, in my sense of connection, I was still projecting. And speaking about projection, I wonder what you see in this image. Take a minute. People get confused. Everybody is so excited in this picture. Of course, the humans are very excited. The horse is in deep pain. Sometimes we don't see, we just project. If we speak about projection, I want to pause for a moment in the therapeutic field. In animal assisted therapy, the focus is often on what happens in the room, on projections, on what the animal means for the patient. What is often left out is the relationship or the lack of relationship between therapist and animal, the animal's living conditions, and the life story it brings into the encounter. From here, I want to invite us to pause and turn toward the real subject. And if we are talking about a real subject, no other subject I can think of rather than Mowgli, the dog who in many ways shaped the relational approach in practice. I want to introduce you to Mowgli. Our relationship began with the fact that I didn't really want her. She was described to me as a small dog with one eye, overly affectionate, dependent. My body felt resistant. Something in me pushed away, and it took me time to understand that this was a fear of letting myself be drawn into a bond, of feeling like a mother to someone who would need me so deeply. Mowgli had a deep attachment wound, found as a puppy alone in the trash on a busy road. About an hour later, she entered deeply into my body, and from that moment on, we were never apart. Mowgli. Every night, the moment we got into bed, Mowgli would stand beside me and stare with her one eye. Come up, I said, and you just stood there, looking at me with that one eye. The same ritual every night for years. I reached down to pick you up, and you crawled into me. Mowgli, do you feel loved? I ask you that every night. You looked at me and licked. Sometimes I couldn't tell if you were licking me or yourself. Morning. Your sister rushed to the food, and you stay under the blanket. You take your time. You're not ready to face the world. It scares you. I'm glad you're not here in these times. Mowgli, eat something. You look at me, then at the ball. Maybe it's poisoned. Maybe even the ball itself is dangerous. I move it, I change the food. You train us. You always win. And then we go out into the world together. You, of course, without a list. And I'm already Mowgli, we're late. We're sniffing the world, studying every plant. Mowgli, maybe we should move? Nothing. Mowgli, okay, fine, sniff. I could never be angry with you. You feel me completely, and I learn to feel every small movement in you. We get into the car. You keep sniffing out the window, and every few minutes I turn around to check that you're comfortable, that you're okay, that you're not too cold, that you haven't disappeared. How many almost accidents came out of that, and one total loss. It's okay, we bought a new car. Mowgli, how can you be so anxious and so dependent, and at the same time an anchor of safety, so wild and so gentle, so completely independent and still so in need, a quiet, powerful presence. How are you all of this? I have never met a complexity like yours. We walk into the clinic. New patient. What can she do? Sit, lie down, give a paw? Me. Not really. Patient. So you didn't train her? Me. I did, and she trains me. You'll get to know each other. She doesn't trust easily. She won't do things for someone she doesn't really know yet. That makes sense, right? Patient. Can I take her on a leash? Me. She doesn't like that. Patient. So what can she do? I look at you and then at him. She can feel you. She knows when you need her close and when you need space. She comes closer slowly on her time. Mowgli looks with her one eye straight into him, and something begins. But in that moment, each of us is still alone. No one is getting exactly what they need. Each of us is holding on to something. He wants to control her. I'm trying to hold space for both of them, and Mowgli moves at her own pace. I say something about the disappointment. I feel the sadness, the frustration. He didn't want to talk. For a moment, I almost moved to please him, to push for closeness, but I stop. There are things you can't rush. In Benjamin's words, the tension between the wish to know and the necessity of not knowing marks the threshold of recognition. So I try to stay with both of them. For a moment, it feels like something is happening between them, like a kind of recognition, but it's not enough. It feels forced, like asking someone to recognize or to be recognized. It doesn't work. And something in that takes us right back to doer and done to. Mowgli takes me one step further. Not recognition, לא הכרה, התמסרות. Not recognition, surrender. What Gant calls surrender is not giving up the self. It is not submission. It is something else, a way of staying connected to the other while allowing them to remain separate, not controlling and not being controlled. What becomes clear to me through Mowgli is that this shift from recognition to being with is not just a change in attitude, it changes the quality of the meeting itself. There are moments in therapy where understanding is not enough, where interpretation is not enough, even recognition is not enough. Something is there, but it remains partial, external, sometimes even forced. In those moments, what is needed is something else. Not more effort, but a different movement. This is not something we do, it happens. And when it happens, it is not surrendering to someone, but letting go into being with. It's a shared surrender. I think Boaz Shalgi is using this term in his beautiful article. Think again about that moment with Mowgli and the patient. She is not just part of the setting. She's there as a subject, as an active agent. Recognition is already present, but each of us is still holding on to something. Similar to the experience of Shalgi describes in his article, I believe that the intersubjective encounter that took place between us in that moment held something beyond mutual recognition. Only when I let go of the need to create the right kind of meeting, something else becomes possible. It is a space in which the therapist is not the only one who holds or interprets, but also one who is affected, who enters the movement, and momentarily let go of the position of knowing. The three of us surrendered to that moment. And within all of this, it is important to stop and recognize something, how quickly deep ideas turn into slogans. It is easy to say recognition, subject, surrender, and just as easy to create practices that look ethical while still keeping the other within a frame of control. We see it, of course, with different population, of course, not just animal. Within this gap between ethical language and lived practice, I find myself leaning on one very concrete space where these questions are tested day by day. So women leading change. This space, a space in which a remarkable group of women in Israel is working to hold exactly this complexity. After this conference, now I know that it's not only in Israel, and I feel really so fortunate to meet so many. We hold it not as a slogan, but as daily work that takes place in animal rescue sanctuaries and with different communities, Jewish, Arab, and Bedouin, work that keeps asking what it means to relate without reducing. We call the groups leaders of the revolution. But the revolution here is not a declaration. It is an ongoing commitment to keep questioning, to notice what we still do not see, to admit where we fail, and not to rush to feel that we have already recognized the other. We don't settle for 5 stars. Even when conditions are good, even when it seems that we are doing the right thing, we keep asking. What are they asking from us that we are not ready to hear? And where are we still quietly reducing them? Some of the women in this group you met yesterday. Hanin, who is leading a deep change in Muslim society. Sivan, who experienced the devastation of October 7th and founded a shelter she chose to call Dialogue for Life. And Noam, who for over a decade has been leading for over a decade has been leading an organization working with trauma in humans and in other animals. And alongside them, other women, Eileen, Yam, Dani, Tom, Rotem, Guy, Anat. And there is also one man, Or, who brings a great deal of light and hope. Each one, in her own way, finds a path within pain, and a lot of pain, to hold care in everyday life, and to shift deeply rooted social perceptions. You can read about their work and about many others leading change in Israel and around the world in the catalog that we sent you yesterday and will send you again now in the chat. It's an amazing catalog that for me, it's a moment of hope that I saw that there are so many initiatives all over the world that creating the same spaces, the same shared spaces. And I want to thank for this catalog to Gaia Flalo, who made it happen, and of course to Noam. Josephine Donovan moved beyond ethics grounded in abstract principle, like rights, and frames ethics as a relational practice of attentiveness and responsiveness to the other's voice and suffering. In this view, ethics is not only about what is right, but about how we remain in relationship, open, affected, and responsive. In this sense, what Donovan describes resonates with the relational approach, a movement of openness to the other, a willingness to be affected. And this is where the gap becomes clear. Rights and recognition can remain at the level of declaration. We can say that animals and other human populations have rights and still remain disconnected from how they live and from the ways we harm them and from what is held outside the frame, even here in the image that I chose to put. In this sense, the ethics of care is not only a framework, but a way of being, to stay in relationship, to not assume we already know, and to keep listening, even when something in us resists. So thank you. I want to dedicate this lecture to the animals who changed my life, to a mother hen I never named, who in remaining unnamed taught me the limits of how we see and recognize the other, and of course to Mowgli. I hope you are finally at rest. No need to keep watch, to check who moves, who disappears. I'm with you all the time. Thank you.